there's this misconception that the writing's good if the writing's easy or if it's flowing naturally. And throughout this whole process of me writing this, it was really hard. And I would say I had more bad days than good. But I think it is absolutely normal. And if anything, I think these feelings of self-doubt means that you're engaging critically with your own work. So I think that struggle means that you're on the right path.
Welcome to the Write It Scared podcast. I'm your host, Stacey Fraser, a formerly repressed creative soul turned fiction writer, story editor, and author accelerator certified fiction book coach. At Write It Scared, we tell the truth about why writing a novel is so hard by acknowledging that most writers grapple with two stories: the one they want to put on the page to the best of their ability, and the often subconscious internal story that prevents them from doing it. This show is designed to help you identify and rewrite the internal narrative holding you back while you discover and write the story you want to tell and learn all the tools to help you do that successfully. Join me each week for a new episode where we'll talk about writing to deepen our understanding of the craft and of ourselves as writers. Writing a novel is an inside job that we do not do alone. Welcome to Write It Scared. I'm glad you're here. Let's dive in. Hey, writer. Welcome back to the Write It Scared podcast. I'm your host, Stacey Fraser. So if you've ever sat at your desk and stared at the page and wondered if the fact that you're struggling means there's something wrong with you or what you're writing, then I think this is a conversation that will resonate, and you'll feel a lot better after you hear it. In today's episode, I'm talking with debut novelist Charlene Wang, author of I'll Follow You, which is a dark academia read about toxic female friendships, ambition, and the powerful pull of social media. We talk about messy drafts, perfectionism, long revision timelines, and what it really looks like to stay in the work when the writing feels hard more days than it does easy. Charlene shares honestly about her years in revision, her doubts, and the mindset shifts that helped her keep going when the process felt overwhelmingly difficult. This is a conversation about persistence, about believing and trusting in yourself when the page seems to fight you. So if you're in the middle of a draft that feels stubborn or fragile or unfinished or broken, pull up a chair. You are not alone. And as I said, I think you're going to feel a whole lot better and more reassured that you're actually doing work that is just challenging you and that is a good thing. Here's Charlene's bio, and then we will jump into the interview. Charlene Wang was born in Beijing. After immigrating to the U.S. when she was 3, she lived in 7 different cities. After graduating with a BA in English from Dartmouth College and a JD from the University of Virginia Law School, she worked as a litigator for 6 years. She now lives in Brooklyn, New York with her partner and their dog, Winky, and I'll Follow You is her debut novel. Charlene, thank you so much for coming on the Write It Scared podcast. It's a delight to have you here. Congratulations on your debut novel, I'll Follow You, which just came out. We're recording this, mid-October, and it came out October 1st, and we're going to dive into that. But first, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to talk about your book. But before we get into that, would you please share a bit more about your journey to becoming a writer and a published author?
Sure. So my journey was, I call it unconventional, though I think most writers actually tend to have an unconventional path to publication. I was a litigator. I was a litigator in New York City for 7 years. And really, people don't believe me when I tell them this, but I did not read a fiction book from ages 18 to 27. I was an avid reader when I was a child. And I don't know what happened, but after college and through law school, I was reading law books. I was studying.
That's all you do in law school is read.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I didn't read fiction, but I kind of found my way back into it after I had just done a really intense murder trial where we were defending. It was a first-degree murder case. And afterwards, I was trying to process my feelings about it. And so I wanted to write what turned out to be a lightly fictionalized story about this trial and the experiences I had. And I started taking workshops around the city. And that's kind of how it all got started, was just trying to make sense of this. I like to think that it's my first book. I think a lot of writers have like shelved manuscripts. But really, I think actually it was just the roughest, rough draft of what turned out to be my debut, I'll Follow You.
So please share what your novel is about. What do you want the readers to know?
Yeah. So I'll Follow You is about two best friends, Faith and Kayla, who are desperate to escape their small town in Mississippi. They have very different ideas about how to do that. Kayla is the beautiful, charismatic one. And she thinks that social media and going viral is her ticket out. Faith, who is the more mousy, brainy one, thinks that, having good grades and getting into a good college is her ticket out. In high school, they create this viral persona where Kayla is the face of this Instagram account called Hannah Primrose. And Faith is writing her captions as her ghostwriter. And they amass a few thousand followers. But at the end of high school, Faith decides to not tell Kayla that she's applying to Harkness College, this elite college. And to her surprise, she gets in. And she leaves Kayla behind in their small town, and it completely fractures their friendship. One night, Kayla shows up outside of her dorm, needing a place to stay. And all of a sudden, Faith finds that, despite this precious, fragile life that she's created on this campus, she feels herself getting pulled back into Kayla's orbit. I call I'll Follow You a mashup between a campus novel, a dark academia novel, and a feminist revenge novel. And I'm not going to say how it gets there, but I had a lot of fun writing it, and I hope readers have fun reading it.
And so this is the first fiction novel you ever attempted?
Yes. I think maybe when I was 8, I wrote a book that was like 8 pages long. I stapled it together and I read it to my class. But yes, this is my first novel as an adult. And yeah, it was a very intense experience. You're meeting people, on the worst days of their life. And, really, I was looking for a way to kind of understand that experience. And I think fiction is one of the best ways to do that, to create space for that sort of processing.
Yeah, an emotional exploration in a safe way. Absolutely. Wow. Well, I think you're absolutely right. Most of us writers do have a bunch of manuscripts in the trunk that we don't want to open.
Yeah.
Those
go
are
there.
Those are right. But not for you. I mean, I think that's incredible. That's your journey. And, you might maybe be a little bit of a unicorn in that way, that your first book hits and lands. And I shared with you before I hit record, your voice and your command of narrative drive is so impressive.
Oh,
I was just reading opening of your book and definitely ordered it. So you went from litigation to fiction writing. Are you still litigating, or are you completely over
No. I had it's a funky little journey, but so one of the workshops that really transformed my craft was this 1-year novel generator class at Catapult. And the whole goal was you finish a manuscript in a year. And it happened that this workshop happened in the beginning of the pandemic. So we met January 2020. We were all writing together through the pandemic. And at the end, there's this, I don't know if it was actually supposed to be in person at first, but nevertheless, it was sort of like a year-end recital. And it was a podcast. And we all read excerpts of our manuscript. And so I read mine and I didn't really think much of it. But afterwards, I got an agent who emailed me and was like, I really like this. Do you have more? And I had an editor reach out to me. And at the time, I had been just extremely burnt out by, being a practicing lawyer during the pandemic. There was a lot of upheaval. My caseload was fluctuating a lot. And so once I started getting this positive feedback, I think I was just like, that's it, let's go. And so, I did something what my mom called extremely stupid. And it probably was. And I quit my very stressful, big law job. And I started doing what's essentially kind of what I call Uber for lawyers. You negotiate contracts on this app. And so you have a lot more like flexibility with your time, even though your caseload is somewhat ad hoc. And so I did that while I was revising. I had signed with my agent about a few weeks after I quit my big law job. And there's a lot of, I think, resetting of expectations that comes with trying to publish a book. And one of them was I thought when I signed with my agent, we go on submission right away. And it turned out the book needed a lot of work. I ended up revising with my agent for 2 years before we went on submission. And yeah, so I was doing Uber for Lawyers. I was revising my book. And it was a really interesting time in my life that was stressful, but also kind of magical looking back on it because, I'm really happy I made that leap.
I think that's awesome. And I've been in that place of also having to make the leap away from a career that no longer served me. It is scary. It is definitely scary. So when did you get the idea for this book?
So when I wrote this lightly fictionalized version of what I went through as a litigator litigating this first-degree murder trial, one of the feedback that I was getting in these workshops was that it was too factual, that my narrative was being bogged down by, all these details. And I think what was really holding me back is that as a lawyer, you're very tuned to the facts. Like facts are very important and you're used to like marshaling them in a brief. But when you're trying to be a storyteller, you kind of have to harness all of those details. And I think because my protagonist was a young lawyer like myself, it was hard to take off the lawyer hat and put on the storyteller hat. And basically, I said, okay, I'm going to write a different manuscript. And this is where I think every book kind of surprises you because you think you have ideas of what you're doing. And then the book has its own ideas. But I said, I'm going to write a book that's the opposite of me. And so I wrote about two best friends who want to become influencers because in my mind, I am the opposite of an influencer. I had no idea what that world entailed. And yeah, and it began as that seed. And I thought that this book would be this lighthearted romp through social media. I knew that I wanted it to be about two best friends. But by the time I finished writing this book, which, took years, I realized that I'd circled back in the end to all of these themes about like power and gender and class that really were the themes that animated my desire to write a book about my legal experience to begin with. And that's why I say that really it is the same book, especially the way it changed over the years. It all was tangled up together. I just didn't have really the vision at the time to really see the forest.
Got it. So let's just talk time frame from the original manuscript that featured a young lawyer to what the book is now. What's that time period?
So I started writing it, I think, in 2018.
Okay.
And worked on it for about a year and a half, 2 years. And then when I started in my novel generator class in the beginning of 2020, that's when I was like, let me try to write a different book. And I finished a manuscript of that and then rewrote that a million more times. And then I signed with my agent in 2021 and we went on submission in 2023.
Wow.
2024.
Thanks for breaking that down. Yeah. So what a journey from starting about a young lawyer to now it's about these two friends who are wanting to escape what sounds like, not a great place to live in the first place. And they have very different ideas about doing that. And then it causes a rift between the two of them that may or may not be deadly and toxic. You'll have to read it. You mentioned in your email to me that you've had what you consider several failed drafts and that you took a trip to be able to research what you needed to put this book together. So tell us how all of that worked. How did you know that the book wasn't working? And how did you know that you needed to take this trip to be able to incorporate the elements into the book that you wanted?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
It was a lot of questions.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
And they're all questions that, I think about all the time. I think that the process of writing a book is very intuitive. And part of, for me, the struggle is being okay with relying on that intuition and being okay with not always knowing the answers right away. I think that when I signed with my agent, she had given me some feedback that this character is a little passive. It feels a little cerebral. A lot of dark academia novels are pretty cerebral. It follows a protagonist who, gets into an elite college and they soon get really wrapped up in some sort of esoteric study. In Secret History, it's the classics. In All Follow You, it's art conservation. And so the trick is you have to figure out a way to honor all of that intellectual interest and balance it with the fact that the character still needs to be someone who has a goal and is making active decisions to reach that goal. And that's something that I think
That's very solid craft advice right there.
When you're getting to know a character from draft zero to, final draft, it takes a while for you to understand what that means, right? And so I am someone who's very cerebral. I'm very abstract. I even wrote a whole essay on Writer's Digest about how as a kid, I never liked playing with my hands. I always liked reading books. I never built forts and sandboxes. And I think I needed to do something to break myself out of that scrolling, looking at textbooks mode, because that's, basically that's 99% of how I get information. And so, I was just like, well, what can I do? And, I started talking to people. So even in New York City, which, I'm very fortunate to live in a city with so many interesting people. I had a friend who knew a friend who was studying art conservation. And so I spoke with her and she had mentioned the way American conservators look at conservation and the way Italian conservators view conservation. They have different attitudes. They have different approaches. And so I was just like, you know what? What the heck? Let me just take the plunge. Let me just spend a week in Florence and see what it feels like to actually be in a studio like that. And so I just did it. And I was very fortunate to be able to have that time to do that. And I think it's really you're trying to embody your character. And if they're different from you in any way, trying to at least what are they touching on a daily basis? What are they smelling? How do they feel in their skin? What are the mundane, practical realities that's weighing them down? And I think that was kind of the detail, the level of specificity that I was chasing. And so that's a long answer. And I think I kind of, went off course, but I'm a big proponent in whatever way you can, just trying to inhabit your character's life. It could be even as simple as going to the grocery store and trying to shop as your character, or even just doing exercises in your brain. If my character got into a car accident, what would they do? Would they pull over? Would they try to talk their way out of a ticket? Would they panic? And so, there's all sorts of ways to get at it. But I think the key is to try to make your character as 3D as possible. You're trying to go from 2D to 3D. And that's the challenge.
Oh, yes, it absolutely is. And I feel you when you say cerebral. I'm very much like that, too, as far as when and it sometimes it feels really hard to pull these people together out of the ether. And I can go round and round and round about it. So I love those are fantastic tips, is to find a way to ground yourself in some experience that maybe your character might experience and try to imagine what it would be like for them. For me, my write tends to be I like settings for, I'm terrible at writing them, but I really like them. So I like vibe, so I'll try to go find the vibe, right? And for whatever reason, I like the gothic, coastal, creepy, foggy places, right? I'm gonna try to go for that. Definitely go for walks in the fog. That's one of my favorite things to do. That can help inspire me. But those are great tips. So that trip really helped you honor the experience that your protagonist was having studying art conservation in this academic setting and helped you make the book more real. So, process wise, once you kind of decided that you were going to switch the novel up completely and write about this friendship, did you plot? Did you pants? How did you bake all that together?
Yeah, that is the $1,000,000 question. I think I began as an outliner, and I was very rigid about sticking to the outline. And I think that was mostly the vibe for book one. I will say I'm working on a second book and I'm trying to do different things because I do think that, the right balance is like you do outline and you have that structure, but you also leave space for experimentation and for letting characters surprise you. And so, yeah, but it's a balance and I think it's tricky.
It is. I have this idea that somewhere, somebody out there has figured it out.
I know.
And I'm just going to go find them. But probably the truth is that, you just figure it out for yourself and you incorporate all kinds of different pieces and it becomes its own amalgam that's specific to you.
Yeah.
But I still don't want to accept that just yet.
I know. Me neither. I want the answer. So if anyone has it, let us know.
Yes. Please dial in. Please dial in. And then we'll phone our friend.
Yes.
All right. Well, a big part of this podcast is dedicated to telling the truth about why writing can be so hard and exposing unhelpful internal narratives that a lot of us writers face when we craft our stories. And the reason that I do this is because I think that we all have those experiences where, we get in our own way. And if we identify them, if we talk about them, if we normalize them, then those doubts won't hold us back so much. Instead, we'll be like, oh, it's, everybody has this. It's kind of part of the process. Right. And I'm not the worst. And so my hope is that will keep the game. More people in the thing that they like to do. And because of that, we'll get more stories in the world and maybe from voices that we wouldn't have heard from. So that is my hope. So in that vein, would you share a time or times when the writing has gotten hard for you, when you struggled with that kind of negative self-talk? What fears or limiting beliefs did you have to face and how did you get by them?
Yeah, that is such a great question. And I just really love that we're making space for this sort of discussion because I think that you're right, that there's this misconception that the writing's good if the writing's easy or if it's flowing naturally. And throughout this whole process of me writing this, I'll Follow You, it was really hard. And I would say I had more bad days than good. Just, being at my laptop, trying to hit my word count. And I absolutely struggled with that because I was like, is this meant to be if it's always so hard, if it always feels like it's not easy, if I'm not in flow? But I think it is absolutely normal. And if anything, I think these feelings of self-doubt means that, you're engaging critically with your own work and you know what a good novel is and you're trying to close that gap. And so I think that struggle means that you're on the right path. But, I would say I struggle a lot with perfectionism, especially in the first draft or when you're still trying to figure out what the story is. I really get myself in my own way because I feel like every sentence has to be perfect. I have to understand the story right away. And so there's a lot of moments where I'm just throwing my hands up in the air and, I have to go take a walk or touch some grass because I just feel like so frustrated. And I don't think that goes away, sadly. I just don't. I just think that being aware of it, that's half the battle. And just being and persisting despite it is the other half.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any particular tools or that you lean on to help you persist through it when you are in a particularly bad period or stuck? It sounds like touching grass is important, which is, I laugh because I have a picture of me laying in the dirt. Like I literally had to go lay down and I was out for a walk and I just decided to lay down on the dirt.
Yeah, that works too.
overwhelmed and I was done.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was literally grounding myself. But anyway, do you have any particular tools that you lean on?
Yeah. So, I have a bunch go-tos. First step is to put a timer on it. So I do a 15-minute timer and I just go like type as much as you can. And just, at the end of the 15 minutes, you'd be surprised at actually how, there's probably a sentence or two you do really like and, you get somewhere. Sometimes I'll do long form. So if it's really not like coming that day, I'll just like take a notepad and just start writing sentences down. And usually that jogs something. And sometimes, some days you're just really not feeling it and that's okay. And in which case I just say it's okay. And I tell myself that, head time is important. Thinking about your book and thinking about the story and the characters is just as important as getting words on the page. And so if it's a day where that's the only thing I feel capable of doing, just giving myself that grace and knowing that that is valuable time too.
Yeah, I love that. I think a lot of us tend to be productivity focused, and it feels like sometimes those actions are not producing anything. And someone, I think it was Becca Syme, who she's an author and she has the Quick Cast, and she's a great advocate for writers. But she said, there's a lot of different ways to view productivity. And if you change your lens a little bit, then the non-writing days, the days you're not tapping away on the keys, actually maybe they are writing days. Maybe writing is thinking. Maybe it is, pondering. Maybe it is journaling. Maybe you're being a little too hard on yourself.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I like that. And I stuck with that. And
Yeah.
I agree, like what you said earlier, the idea of maybe I shouldn't be doing this because it's just not easy. It's just not coming. It's just not, it's harder most days than it is easy. I love that you said that. One, because that's really how I feel right now.
Yeah.
But the idea of stopping or doing something else just is so distasteful to me. I don't want to do that either. But I don't know if you heard it, but Lee Berdugo's TED Talk about the art of discomfort. It came out. Go watch it. It's so good. It's only like 15 minutes. And I've talked about it on the podcast before, but it's the same idea. It's like just because it's hard doesn't mean you're on the wrong track.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so it's part of the process of being creative is learning to sit with discomfort when it's not easy.
Yeah. No, that's a great way of putting it.
I didn't do it. She did it.
Well,
but I paraphrase.
Yeah, a little bit. Love it.
But yeah, I will link to that TED Talk in the show notes. And then the other idea, what you were speaking about of the gap, like what a good novel is. When you read it, you know it, you can feel it, and you can also feel the state of your draft and how not good it is in comparison, right? And that's the gap. And I like to say that the gap will close itself if we just continue to do the work. And it reminded me, have you ever seen or heard Ira Glass's?
Yeah, that's exactly who I was thinking about. Yeah, I love that.
I can't remember what that is called, what that little segment is called that he does. Maybe it is The Gap?
No.
I don't know either.
Yeah, but it's genius. So thank you, Ira Glass.
Thank you, Ira Glass. Absolutely. And I'll link to that. It's on YouTube in the show notes too, because it's inspiring. And it basically just says, just because it's hard doesn't mean you're not supposed to be a writer. It just means that, that's what everybody experiences, this gap. And the reason that you're a writer is because you got good taste. You know what's good. And now you're working on making what you're creating good too. And it just takes time.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing I really like to look at when I'm feeling so uncertain is I think of my favorite writers and I look at their body of work. And, some writers, like this is something I love doing is I find a writer I love and I'll read their whole backlist. You can really see their evolution. And, it's like, it's not that, Hemingway is producing a perfect novel every time, right? There's some really good novels. There's some great novels. Maybe they have a perfect novel even, but there's a variability to their output and there's an evolution and everyone's starting somewhere. And I find that very comforting because I'll read, someone's debut of someone I admire whose career I'm like, I wish I could have a career like theirs. And I read their debut and I see it like, oh, like, I see some of this, like a lot of debuts, they have certain attributes. And you see that and you're like, okay, like even somebody as amazing as this person, started somewhere. And so I find that to be, at least for me, like, misery loves company. And, knowing that, everyone has that growth. I think that is also very reassuring.
Yeah. And it's inspiring too. And the thing that's cool about writing is that I don't think we'll ever master it. Like you'll never be, there's no pinnacle here.
Right.
Not really. I mean, you can keep growing and changing and trying new stuff. And it's, I don't know who said it, but somebody said that writing is a pursuit that I can't remember it. So I'm not going to say it. But anyway, but I think that's part of what's cool about it is that it can challenge you as much as you want it to challenge you.
And I think if it could be perfected or mastered, it wouldn't be as satisfying in a way. It wouldn't be as magical.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it is magic. There is so much magic to it. Creating something that didn't exist before, pulling two random ideas together, seeing something spark from that. That's magic to me. Well, thank you for sharing about the times when it has been hard and how you worked through it. So, and just looking back, I mean, this is your debut novel. This is the first novel that you've worked on, but it was 6-7 years in the making, if not more.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
So it's not like I just woke up and wrote a book and they published
it. No.
Right. There is sweat equity here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm not even including all of the years I was wanting to be a writer and just couldn't write, So I think it is a journey.
Tell us a little bit about that. What were those years like where you wanted to be a writer, but you couldn't write?
Yeah. So, growing up, I didn't know any writers. I loved reading, but it just was not something that seemed possible. It was not in the lexicon for someone like me. And, I did some creative writing classes in college, but it's not like anyone was like wowed by my talent, like it was just a college class. And I think I always, there were certainly novels that moved me. Like I read The Secret History, I think the summer before I went to college. And I went to a college in New England. So, it was really hitting me right, right in the sweet spot. And I guess I just didn't think that I could make something like that aesthetically. And it took a long time for me to even just say out loud, like, I want to be a writer, years. And it's just something that it's not in your active consciousness, but it's kind of percolating in that in-between place where you're not even cognizant of what you want because you don't even have the language to put it in words. And so there was a long time. And like I said, I didn't read fiction much after the age of 18 and through law school. And so I don't know what it was about the first degree murder trial, but I think it was the first time actively in my mind, I thought I lived through something and I have something to say about it. But again, it wasn't, I want to be a writer either. It was just like, I have something to say. And then after doing these workshops and, kind of doing the practice of it, it became over time, I want to be a writer.
Yeah. When did you decide you were one?
Man, I mean, honestly, I remembered being afraid of putting writer in my Instagram bio until after I signed with my agent. And I don't recommend that, like I was so scared and I was so, people, I talk about this a lot, but people, it's scary when you're trying to become something of showing that to the world.
Yeah, it's like failing in public.
Yeah.
In a way.
People think it's cringe or like, I feel like that is a word that gets bandied around a lot of like being afraid of being seen as cringe. And yeah, I think, honestly, like probably when I put it in my Instagram bio, that was like the most public expression of it. But maybe like I did say when I was in my novel generator class, I was like, Charlene, you're not going to do this in secret and not tell anyone. So I started telling my friends and I was like, I'm doing this workshop. I'm trying to be a writer. And luckily I have very supportive friends. And so it was great. But yeah, probably then.
Yeah. Well, I can identify with the struggle to say I'm a writer, because in my mind, a writer is somebody who writes beautiful things. Right. And I don't yet, or I didn't, I'm not, what I mean? I just wasn't there yet. So
Yeah.
Over time, I have come to believe that just if I write, I am a writer. And I also believe I have something to say. And both of those things was an evolution for me to get there. I just didn't wake up one day and be like, oh, I got it figured.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it didn't happen like that. And I don't think that that's a unusual experience. So I think it's just a very common struggle to embrace that identity, to be comfortable with it. So if anybody out there is like struggling with that, you're not alone. You're not cringe in any way, shape, or form. And I'm going to argue that you are a writer if you are writing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a couple more questions to ask you before we wrap up. The first is, what is the best piece of writing advice you think you've ever received?
I was reading the Andre Agassi biography, and something his tennis coach tells him is like, you don't have to hit every ball a winner. And that really helped me in my perfectionism because I felt like every sentence had to be perfect. And it was really strangling the life out of whatever it was on the page. So I think that is the best writing advice. Just you don't have to hit a winner. You don't even have to have any good sentences in your first drafts. Like you just have to keep on doing it and just get to the end.
Solid. And what wish would you like to impart to your fellow writers out there who are working on their first novel or maybe their fifth and just haven't gotten anywhere with it? Yeah, what wish would you like to impart to your fellow writers?
It's simple, but just believe in yourself and keep believing in yourself. It's so simple, but I think that's what I think is the most important is that you're, especially in the beginning, you're going to have no one believing in you. Maybe your close friends, maybe your family, but you're going to get a lot of rejection. I certainly did. I think every writer I know did. And that does not mean that you don't have the talent. In fact, I think writing talent is the least of it. I think a lot of it is perseverance. And so, yeah, just keep going. And it's going to happen. Maybe not on the timeline you think, but it will.
Well, would you like to share anything that you're currently working on? And then please let listeners know where they can find you and your book, I'll Follow You.
Yeah, so I'm right now working on an upmarket thriller. It is about a multicultural girl group and their final tragic concert. And that's all I really know about it right now. So yeah. And you can find me on Instagram at Charlene Shi. And my author website is www.charlenewangauthor.com.
Right on. And I'll Follow You is available wherever books are sold.
Yeah.
At this point, because it was released October 1st. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. You were a delightful guest. I appreciate your vulnerability and your honesty. And so will everyone else who listens to this. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Thank you for listening to the Write It Scared podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please make sure to hit the follow button so you never miss an episode. And please leave a review. Reviews help other writers like you find the voices and messages they need to hear to continue to write their stories. Let's lift each other up. Remember, you can be scared and still be unstoppable. I'll see you next week.